Welcome to the Empower Hour show. In today's hour, we're going to talk about presentation skills. Everything around presentation skills, what needs to be learned, how to be an effective presenter. It's a skill that we can learn. And so there's different things that are important to integrate, to prep for, to finish up, and a lot more around that. Also going to cover a little bit how to present online, meaning in Zoom calls, if you lots of remote work. So lots of people have to present via Zoom or some other platforms. We're also going to cover a little bit more about the importance of the connection with your audience. So lots of good stuff. I'm super excited. I got my guest Sheila Miller-Nelson here today. She is an expert in teaching presentation skills and more. So welcome, Sheila. I'm excited you're here today. Sheila, I'm dying to hear actually your journey. I'm a sucker for like the where are they now stories. So I love to hear a little bit because your journey is super interesting. So I love to hear a little bit your journey and how you got to where you at now.
Sure. Well, thank you. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you today. So my journey took this kind of approach, and I'm guessing that as people see that, they think, oh, I took that same approach. So when I was younger, in elementary school and so forth, I was very interested in people and in communications, in relationships, just that whole kind of how do people move around each other and get along with each other and so forth. And my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Forbes, actually took it upon herself as an extra event through our fourth grade year to teach us American Sign Language. And so at the end of the year, we had a local school for the deaf. One of their grades came and spent the day with us. And if you could go the whole day only using ASL and not verbalizing English language, then you got to go to Dairy Queen with Mrs. Forbes. So it was quite a lofty prize. So when I found out at that age, at fourth grade, that I was just very interested in communication and how people do and don't communicate well, what works and what doesn't. So fast forward, as I went through high school and then into college, I stayed within the communication field and graduated with a degree in speech communications, which would allow me to become take the road to becoming a speech pathologist. And I moved from Ohio to California right after I graduated. And in the same week, I did an interview at a facility for older adults, for aging adults, where I could have been their associate speech pathologist or their assistant speech pathologist. And I also interviewed in a large aerospace company, rather. And they were totally different. And this other job, this aerospace job, had nothing to do with the specific part of my degree, but it did have to do with the communication and the relationship part. So that's where the path I was taking in my studies kind of would have gone this way, but I ended up going into business and going that aerospace route and staying there for 17 years. And then while I was there, I took the Dale Carnegie course. And very quickly, upon taking that, that turned into a training and mentorship. And I ended up working for Dale Carnegie as a facilitator and senior trainer. I worked there for 10 years. And that was wonderful. And in fact, I had some clients who were in the aerospace and engineering and science and so forth. And so even though I don't have that type of background, it was really neat to bring the communications piece to that and the relationship piece to that. And then when I had my third child, I left all that behind and started my own company. And that has allowed me to expand into some other arenas and work with many different clients across the United States. So it's been, yeah. Oh, and then I also got my sign language certification. So I am a certified sign language interpreter. That was something that I did somewhere in the middle there after college. And although I don't use it very often, it's just, it comes in handy sometimes. I have had some instances where I've been able to use it. So
yeah, but I'm actually curious because I had no idea that you have that. And I thought that was actually kind of cool. And I wonder, having that knowledge, does having the knowledge of the sign language has helped you or understanding more nonverbal communication possibly? I mean, is
immensely.
Okay.
Immensely. So sign language is not just about the hands and the signs. It's really about face and body reading. So you're reading the whole picture. Like when you watch a movie, you're not just watching what one person's doing, you're watching the whole scene. Yeah. And so it definitely contributes to acknowledgement of what is being said or signed and what's missing, and then what else are things congruent. And we talk about this often with clients. What I'm saying and what I'm doing, or what I'm saying and how I'm looking, are those things congruent? Do they match and tell the same story? Or am I saying, oh, I really like that, but is my face not saying I really like that?
I'm like, what is she doing? Oh, that is so interesting. So it actually really is a super beneficial background to have in the curriculum that you're creating and working with clients.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I know you're doing a lot more, but can we start with, I know you work on presentation skills, and I think that it's fantastic. And I got a little taste years ago. You did a little test with me there, or assessment on me. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I know it has evolved since, but I particularly want to, and we're going to talk about the other things too, because you're doing so much more, but presentations and, particularly the clients I'm working with, right? They are usually stressed, overwhelmed, they're just on the edge, and they have to manage their energy, and presentations or important meetings are a lot of times what, is a real challenge to them. So I teach the brain-based exercise to deal with the stress ahead of time and coping skills for that. But we can actually downgrade the stress if we go in confident with knowing we have the skills to present. And that's what I'd love to hear a little bit from you about is, because that's another component, right? So what do you think is the most important thing when it comes down to presentations?
Well, most important, they compete for number one, but I will say the answer that nobody wants to hear is practice. That's the one that people are like, oh, is there anything else I can do besides practice this? But really, what sport, what skill, where in the world is anybody great at something that they haven't practiced? And when I work with clients, I remind them that even improvisational comedians, right? People who get up and just kind of off the cuff, hey, give me a job or give me something and I'm going to make light of that or make fun with that. They've practiced that. Yeah. That's not just the first time that they've done it. So practicing definitely can, as you mentioned, lead to the comfort and the confidence to be able to be a little bit more at ease when you present. Because as I say things a few times, as I have my points laid out, my bullet points laid out, going through that and practicing like you mean it, right? So practicing the way that you intend to present. Okay. So it's not sitting down kind of mumbling through or just looking over, going through it in my head. there's a huge transition that happens when we take that and now we stand up and we're using our hands and moving around and so forth. A lot of other distractions can take away from it. So truly standing up and practicing out loud in your living room or to your friends or your family or coworkers, wherever.
So essentially doing a full role play of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it totally makes sense. Yes, I always use that too. Hey, it's a skill and the skill needs to be learned. It's like nobody learned playing guitar within like 2 days.
Right.
It does take time to learn skills. And the other thing is too, I think, especially when it comes down to presentations, right? The brain doesn't like uncertainty and not, that's when the threat level comes in.
Right.
And so when you actually practice the skills, right, and you already anticipate what's going to happen, what you're going to do, and know what you're going to do, you actually taken the uncertainty out of it a little bit. I love that. Yes, practicing. Yeah, nobody likes to practice.
Well, and along with that, you're talking about the uncertainty. The other thing that I would say competes very heavily with the practicing is making sure that you know your opening and your closing, and so well that you can, right? That's the only time I recommend to people pseudo memorize or memorize those first couple of lines and those last couple of lines, so that, because if you think about when we go to a movie, right? If we don't get kind of captivated and interested in it right away, it's harder. Like we have to really kind of ramp up and get into it, and sometimes the audience will tune out before they're given the chance to get into it. And then at the end, we don't want to leave the audience guessing if we're done or not. We want to leave them with some sort of impression, whether it's a message or an ask. We're asking them to do something or encouraging them to do something, whatever that is. And then in the middle, we just have a couple of bullet points and we're talking conversationally. But because we've practiced, we know what we're going to talk about in those bullet points, but we don't want to memorize every word because then it can sound robotic and kind of dull and over practice. So definitely practice, know your opening and your closing, and then in the middle, just have a couple bullet points and you'll probably be off to a great start, both in here, right, with the heart, where how fast your heart is beating, and then mentally, right, and emotionally, how do you feel about the presentation?
Oh, I love that. That is a fantastic tip, actually. I haven't even thought about it like that, but it's oftentimes you get those presentations, right? Somebody goes on and on and on, and it seems like not coming to an end. It could have ended already because they may have not thought about really how they're going to end it and end it on a high note. Right.
Yes. And oftentimes, and I see this many times with my students in high school and middle school, I also see it with adults. So I tell my student clients, it's no different. You would be maybe surprised at what I see with adult clients as well, because if we didn't learn and practice the skill necessarily in middle and high school and then into college because we were doing other things, so not our fault, we just never had the opportunity to learn and or practice this. What I see happen at the end of presentations often is, that's it. I'm done. That's all I've got. I mean, it's just kind of this kind of offhanded throwaway sentence, and you've taken what oftentimes is a really great presentation and it just kind of dives right into the dirt.
Yeah, actually, I love that because you started really working with adults because that's your thing, but then you shifted also into the students level, which I think is fantastic because it's so much harder to learn certain skills later. And if the kids already learn it, like you said, middle school, high school, you need presentation skills, not just for school, it's for life. Right. Whatever most jobs, and it might not be you present in a meeting at a big company or something, but you might be presenting in other ways, sometimes in volunteering, or something like that. You need to present something. So to just feel more comfortable speaking, starting that early, I think is fantastic. So I love that you started that as well.
Well, and Heike, I know that based on everything that you do, that it is easier to create a good habit
Yep.
than to try and break a bad one.
Yep.
Right. So if I come up doing it the correct way, even if it can be a little bit more taxing and difficult to get myself wrapped around that skill and doing it the right way, it is oftentimes, I would submit almost always, easier to do that and grow up with that skill than it is to take a habit that we've, that's been a little off and try and get it to go back in when we're, older, whatever age that is.
Yeah, no, I love that you actually hinting towards the word of habit, since habit building is a huge component of my work, because to get a work-life balance and managing energy, you need habits. It just doesn't work without, right? Good routines, good habits. What are the habits that are really, really beneficial for presentations?
Some of them probably are in line with just healthy life habits. So the first one would be, as we're preparing for the presentation, I have a course that is built on simply presentation pre-work, and it talks about what are the things I need to think about. And the very first question out of the 26 questions in that course is, should this be a presentation? Now, this is usually for my adult clients, but one of the habits to get into is there value in taking time and energy to turn this into a presentation? Or should this be simply a packet of information that I'm sending out? Should this be a stand-up 5-minute presentation? Should this be a 1 hour with many slides? All those sorts of things. So really honing in on what it is that you're trying to accomplish with this presentation, because oftentimes we start building, but we've not really thought about that. And we end up with a monster, right? A real beast. I've been in many presentations where there have been 147, 172 slides, that sort of thing. Yeah. And the challenge is that, right, who is this built for? Who's the audience? And making sure that we're asking those pre-work questions before we go in. So that's a really great habit to get into. Yeah. What am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? Et cetera. And then some basic things that probably you tell clients as well, right? Good nutrition, water, right? Being hydrated, having enough sleep, right? I've got mine too. Having a good amount of sleep beforehand, doing that practice and preparation, so we're not trying to figure it out as we go into the meeting or the presentation. So a lot of it is beforehand and less about when you're in the moment. The one thing I would say, the habit that I do encourage people to acquire is, anytime you're going to present, is to do something physical beforehand. And I know you and I have talked about this. So if you have the luxury, the ability to walk around the block or to walk around the outside of the building or the house or wherever you are, but if you are in the middle of a meeting and you say, well, I can't just get up and leave and go walk around, then, scrunch up your toes in your shoes, squeeze your knees together, get that blood flowing, and get the oxygen flowing through your body so that so they don't have to kind of ramp up when you get up to speak. Yeah, that's actually some exercise that I teach, like the ones for calming down or energizing. Somebody has to present, right? It might feel really tired and not, energized enough. So those I have taught my clients as far as calming down, energizing before stuff. But I love that. So you have a whole course that actually gives you all the cornerstones that you need to really prep everything, and then how to go through that. And then what's after the presentation? The first thing after the presentation is congratulating yourself for a job well done. And the first thing that people ask me almost exclusively is, what if I didn't do a good job? Well, let's not have that attitude going into it, right? So having a positive attitude about the experience, about your audience, about everything. And even in having this job and doing what I do, there are plenty of times when I think afterwards, right, this could have gone differently. I could have said this. My hands weren't in the right place. Whatever. So after we're done with the presentation, you did it. That's the first, right? Pat on the back. Yay. Yeah. Then marking down 2 things that you would do differently next time. So what are some things that right? I would use my hands more. I would use my hands less. I would make sure that I'm connecting with the audience. And we can talk about eye connection versus eye contact, and if you would like, but connecting with my audience. And then also, what are some things that you did really well that you say, hey, I want to make sure next time maybe it was, sometimes it'll be a phrase. I said these 3 or 4 words together, and I really like the way that sounded. It makes sense to what I'm talking about. I want to jot down that phrase. So again, first starting with a mini celebration, even if that means you're just going back to your chair at the conference table there, right? Having some positive congratulatory thoughts. And then thinking about what might I do differently next time? And then what would I like to continue doing because it went well?
Love it. Love it. Such good insights. Thank you. Love it. Yeah. I used to be very hard on myself, being recovering perfectionist, as I call myself.
Yeah.
But I've learned over the years too, celebrating yourself and your accomplishments is so vital for health, for well-being and health, not just performance, but we get that dopamine release, even celebrating us a little bit about there's something good you did. And even if it's just you got through it, is the celebration worth. So it doesn't always have to be the big things, but to do that actually as a habit right after, I love it that you that. Love that.
Well, and that helps to generate more positive feelings about the next time that I'm going to go do it. Right. So just, again, creating that habit of congratulating yourself. And I have had several, I don't know, I don't have an exact number, but I have had clients over the years who have been so concerned, afraid, uncomfortable with speaking that they either won't get up to the front of the room initially. And I've also had people in tears. I mean, like actually in tears. I've had people run out of the room. So I understand that it can be extremely uncomfortable, intimidating. I mean, all those things. So helping, like you said, even if you say, well, the only thing that I can think to congratulate myself on is that I did it. For many people, that's a massive accomplishment.
Yeah. So what do I do though, if I do get to that moment in a presentation? I know one is practicing, right? Keep practicing, but or is there any advice to, when I'm getting stuck in the presentation, I'm, blank is a, very common one, right? That all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm saying. Where am I at? What are we doing?
Here's the really cool thing, that you're human and so is everybody else in your audience. So they're not perfect. You're not perfect. If they are expecting perfection, that would be odd because, right, there isn't perfection. So being able to stop, be connected with your audience enough to say, I was just going to say something brilliant and I'll think of it in a minute. So a habit that I have collected and used, I would say over the last couple of years, is instead of saying, oh my gosh, I lost my, oh gosh, I know, that not only takes my emotional state, but the whole audience. Now it's like, oh, I'm uncomfortable and I feel bad for the speaker, or gosh, why didn't they, it conjures up a lot of stuff. If I'm able to say, and I have something brilliant to tell you on the slide and it'll come to me in a moment, right? Keeping it in the positive, that generally it helps people to stay kind of aloft, if you will, and yourself as well as the speaker. You're allowed to forget things. You're allowed to say billion instead of million and then come back and correct it. Even if you watch news anchors or people who are on television who do this for a living, right? There are mistakes that are made. So you just fix it and move on. The bigger you make it, the bigger, right? It's only let's see, it is equivalent to the size that you make it, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, you're so right. And so it's really about the mindset going in, knowing, you know what? Just be me,
Yeah.
own it in the moment, right? But you said another very important thing is two important things, the more important things, but that stuck out for me here is, the audience will pick up on your energy.
Yes.
And which is called actually mirror matching. But like they pick up on it. So if you're freaking out and you get nervous, they're nervous for you or feel bad about. So if you're really taking charge and just own it and go like, hey, you know what, with confidence, hey, I'll come back to me. The other thing is so huge one is connection, the connection, you and the audience. And can you go a little bit more into that? Like,
yes.
Yeah, I know that's what we could talk about for the next day, like the whole day. But
yes, Heike, I would really like to talk about that.
Just that nugget, because I think that is so important. And that's really where leaders really thrive is, and where you go, some of them are like, oh, they're so good. And it's often because the way they connect with others. Sure. And it's, again, a skill we can learn. So it's not like we're born with it or not. We can learn it. But yeah, please dive in because I'm dying to learn more.
Yes. It's one of my favorite things to talk about with clients, because oftentimes I will see, or we could go out and search videos online and find speakers who would say, wow, they kept doing a repetitive hand movement. And Sheila, you tell me not to do this repetitive hand movement because it's annoying. Yes. And if they have connected with their audience, if they have built that, whether it's through their eyes, through the fact that they are looking into the audience and picking up on what's going on in the audience, that connection can really be a panacea, if you will, for some of those other things that we might consider when we're working on presentation skills. So yes, we do work on posture, and we work on the language selection, and we work on what we're doing with our body and our hands. The connection, though, that we build with the audience is how it makes them feel. Right? There's a Maya Angelou quote that talks about, right, your audience will remember how you made them feel, or the person you're speaking to. So when I come to the stage, if you will, even if I'm seated at a conference table, even Heike, if it's just a one-on-one conversation, when I am invested in my audience, right? And remember, I said we're going to memorize those first couple of sentences. That's so we can the plane takes off and we're successful takeoff, right? So those first couple of sentences, while I'm using or opening the presentation, I'm going to connect with my eyes. And why do I say connect versus eye contact? Because contact, for all the scientists out there, can be fleeting, right? It doesn't have to be any length of time to be contact. So sometimes, and I think that you'll see this through the camera, we get the hummingbird person who's contacting all of those people, but not connecting with any of them.
Okay.
So connecting, staying with that person for a little bit of the thought until that person, usually they'll smile, they'll nod their head. There's something that they'll do that, right, we've connected, and now I'm going to move on to another person. It doesn't have to be the person next to them. It can be somebody on the other side of the room. But building that rapport as though you're in my living room and we're having a chat. Now, when I fumble and forget my place or misstep, miss a word, my audience is going to be more forgiving because we've connected. Also, when I'm talking with my audience, and remember, we said we're going to memorize the opening and the closing, just a couple lines, but in the middle, we've just got bullet points. Having that be conversational allows me to look out at my audience and see that someone has a look. Oh, Tom, did you have a question? Or it allows me to maybe course correct, because maybe the way I'm saying something isn't quite landing with the audience. It's not making as much sense as I'd like it to. I can course correct. Another way to say that is, right, But I can't do that if I'm not connected with my audience. If I'm only here for me and my presentation, then I lose so much if I kind of put up this barrier and I'm so worried about how do I look? How do I sound?
Yeah.
What are my hands doing? All this stuff. And I'm right here. So I need to put myself out there with my audience.
Which kind of comes back to why you should practice, right? Because when you practice, all of this hand movement and things like that are done, and you can actually show up for your presentation, not have to worry about that because you practice, and then you can connect with your audience. And it sounds like it's also a lot of an awareness, learning the awareness, like you said, the facial expression. But not to be interpreted, I'm assuming, right? Because sometimes you might look at something and like, oh, they're bored. Maybe they weren't bored. Maybe they were tired. So, you know.
Yeah. And one special tip I feel compelled to give it at this point, because I mentioned that about reading the audience.
Yeah.
My suggestion is to, as if we are going, let me back that up. So I look out and Tom looks like maybe as a question, maybe that didn't quite land with him. Hey, Tom, it seems like maybe you don't understand that. Ooh, okay. I probably don't want to say that about my audience, either one person or my whole audience. I don't. Is this making sense to you? Because that can sound like we're not smart enough to understand. So it's on me, right? I'm the communicator. So it's my responsibility to get the message across. So in that instance, I'm going to either simply rephrase or say, when I was doing this, right, I had to look at it a couple times, because however you want to approach that, but there are a multitude of ways of getting the information in a different form to your audience in the moment, if you need to, without having them feel like it's their fault that they didn't understand.
So it's really learning specific phrases that you can connect with them, because that actually asking them some question or something is a way of connecting with them.
Sure.
So it's just a matter of knowing which way to phrase it, so it makes everybody feel comfortable and being part of it. So I love that. So love to hear, because you ventured, because that's how I know years ago, but you ventured into a lot more as far as facilitator, team building, but also I love to hear maybe first about really in well, you had a great phrasing on there on your website when I looked at it. Disagreeing with
dignity.
With dignity. I love that one. I have to ask you about that one, because I think that is something, comes back to communication and connection as well. Can you a little bit explain how what's important about it? And I'm assuming right now that's part of your program as well.
Yes. In fact, that will be coming up here in just a couple of weeks. I'm doing that for another client. It is a popular topic so all of the workshops that I do, whether it's a 2-hour workshop, a 2-week or a 2-year program, they're all customized toward whatever the client's needs are. Because if I buy a box of something, but I only want 75% of it, then that other 25, right, is a waste of time, money, etc. And that doesn't serve anybody well. So while I have these sessions, such as Disagreeing with Dignity, those are peppered with scenarios from the actual client. So every time I do that for a client, I work with the person who is the leader or the person who's hiring me, and we talk about why was this an important topic for you? And then we put in scenarios that make sense for that organization or for that team. And really, it is a process that we go through, talking about what can we consider, a methodology of how we can consider when we know we're going to go into a disagreement, right? Many times my clients know that, hey, we're coming to the table and we have opposition for, sometimes it's something little, sometimes it's the whole contract, if you will. But what are some things that we consider? And then also it's a great methodology to work through, kind of practice through, because we're not always alerted when we're going to get, right? I come to staff meeting and I say something and someone across the table from me disagrees or my leader disagrees. How do I do that in a way that I say, wake up tomorrow and feel good about who you were yesterday?
I love that.
Because sometimes we're humans again, right? So we're passionate about what we're passionate about. We think we're right. So sometimes that can get in the way of how we verbalize things and how we recognize and treat and keep that connection with other people. And this also comes up in my critical thinking workshop, because we talk about in critical thinking, it's not about being right. It's about coming together to find the best solution. And sometimes that can be hard as you're bantering back and forth with, this is my idea, this is your idea. So how do we do that in a way that everyone walks away fully intact, still friendly? And again, that tomorrow I wake up and say, hey, I'm okay with the person. I'm happy with that person. I would, if my whoever, my child, my grandmother, my next door neighbor, my spouse, somebody was in the room with me, I'd still be holding my head up high.
Love that. Love that. Is there also in this topic, I think we have to do a whole nother show on this one, because it's a whole nother component of it. But what do you think is or from your experience for sure, is the biggest challenge for people in that?
In the disagreeing with dignity?
Yeah. What is their big personal challenge that they need to overcome to get to that point?
One we talk about is part of the process is to talk about commonalities, to find commonalities. And oftentimes all we see is this opposition, right? Okay. Whatever the thing is, even if it's a whole contract, but there's just one point of opposition, when we come to the table, that's the focal point. And so part of the process is to come I've actually facilitated this with clients on either side of the table. Okay. And sometimes you have to set that bar really low, right? Really low. Do you want to stay working here and have your job tomorrow? Well, yes, I do. Well, hey, so do you, right? And so I know that's a really low place to start.
We want to actually be at the same table.
But we build from there and say, okay, and what's another thing you have in common? What's another? And to the point that now we're recognizing we're more alike than we are different. Yeah. And so now let's talk about the point or points of difference and see. And oftentimes that helps the emotion and the mindset get to a place where, okay, well, we've established that we're similar, because human nature is we are more aligned when we are similar with somebody, right? That's our friend. That's the person we like. That's the person we're more willing to help out. Those are the people that we seek out, are people we're similar to. So if we can point out and find those similarities, and sometimes it just takes somebody else to come along and help with that part of the process. Yeah. Yeah. And so you do that too, right? To moderate those type of meetings. Yeah. So I am not a certified mediator, so it doesn't get legal or anything like that. Yeah. But when I'm dealing with folks who, and it's not always contractual either. Sometimes it's just parties in different teams, right? Yeah. We've got a process and we do a handoff of a part and we can't figure out how to make this work. All we can do is fight. Yeah. So, right. We want to, in order to make you spend a lot of time at work. Most of us do. So, or with workmates and so forth. So how do we, to your point about the work-life balance, how do we make those hours of our lives healthy, happy, productive, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that we go home, not just like, feeling good about ourselves and at night, but like you said, I love it. Like the next morning, waking up and going like, I feel good about myself,
Yes.
even though
Yeah.
yesterday may have been challenging, but I got through that in the, best version of me. And knowing that, I utilize the skills and applied them,
Yeah.
which we can learn in all these different areas.
Well, and the other thing too is that as you grow potentially into a leadership position, so now these two folks who maybe have been teammates, and one grows into a leadership position, right? And sometimes this person then ends up reporting to them. I mean, there are all sorts of dynamics that go on. Or we were on opposite teams and now there's been a shuffle and now we're on the same team. So if we can do that, disagreeing with dignity, the connection, the communication, all of these pieces, if we can work them in and not just consider them a nice to have over there, but if we work them in on a daily basis, then it helps with the overall culture of the organization, right? Because then when we become on the same team or when one of us rises to a leader, I have respect for how they work through those difficult times with me, right? Instead of we had a knockdown brawl and nobody won ultimately.
Now I'm going to ask you a little more personal question.
Oh, yes.
What do you love about your job? Because I know you have passion. I know you love it. So what do you love about it?
I feel very fortunate that, as I mentioned, I work in, people will say, well, who are your workshops for? And I said, any company or organization with people, just pretty much all of them. I feel very fortunate, though, whether it is technology or aerospace or manufacturing, that real estate, I mean, there are so many brilliant people that I get to work with and jokingly, I say, I don't know how many conversations I could have with you. I mean, about your job specifically, right? Because that's just not what I know. But to be able to still bring something valuable to those folks is really, it feels good. It feels meaningful to have a senior scientist with, many letters and degrees and so forth say these 4 hours were some of the most beneficial in the 34 years that I've worked here in terms of personal growth, things like that. So what I
on that one.
well, what I submit to people, and I talk to my students about this, right? When I teach students, it's not about, right, you have a PhD and I don't, or what have you. It's that if we all open up and truly connect, we can all learn things from one another. Yeah. So I'm honored and I feel very fortunate and lucky to be able to connect with people and come alongside them and say, while you were off in engineering at college, I was off doing this. Yeah. Let me share with you. And it's only going to take 4 hours. You don't have to do it for 4 years.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's something that's not part of their curriculum and their specialization. Right. And unfortunately, I think especially presentation skills, communication skills, everybody needs them, not just at work, but also in personal life and your relationships. And it's not taught, right? Like it's not taught in any of these professions. So having good communication skills and presenting skills as well, they're not taught, like you said. They just, you present, like you said, with the students, it's just like, okay, you got your presentation. The adults at work, you have your presentation. Okay. Because nobody ever taught them. So one more question on there, because we kind of went back and forth here, but like teaching the students and going in there, share a little bit more what you do with them. Are you doing anything differently with them, or is it very similar, or how does somebody look at that?
Yes. So if any of my former students see this, I will say here what I say to them. I am teaching you the exact same thing that I work with my adult clients on, because they're just people who have spent more years on this planet.
Yeah.
really the fundamentals don't change. So where it changes is when I teach summer school or after school classes, I hear and I still learn so much about Minecraft and basketball positions and all sorts of things. Whereas, of course, the topics for my adults are a little bit different because they're work focused, but still the fundamental teachings are exactly the same. So the great news is for these students, they're, like we said, they're building these solid habits that they don't have to, I mean, they can grow them and continue to become more comfortable with them, but they don't really have to change anything. They've already got those foundations. So yeah,
and it's a very important thing in general of how business in general changes, right? Like we do, it's the soft skills that we need to have in any professions are very different than like 30, 40 years ago. So to learn those from early on is just a great foundation for the ones who actually learn that, when they're young.
Right. And you and I were talking about or mentioned AI a little bit earlier. And one of the things some of my students will bring up to me is, well, now we've got AI or now we've got technology and robots and so forth and so on. And who's behind that, right? So there's still, as you mentioned, there's still people in your home space. There's still people in your neighborhood. There's still people in the organizations you do outside of work and school. And for the foreseeable future, you will still have humans to connect and communicate with. So still continuing, right? Not putting these types of things on the shelf and thinking, oh, they're not necessary.
Awesome. Now, I have a personal question here too, because I've been doing, well, just as far as, Zoom, right? We got, we're online, right? Lots of meetings are happening online now. I actually, through the pandemic, did a lot of speaking engagements online at health fairs for different companies.
Sure.
And I was there just me. I mean, because it was like the room kind, so you don't see the people that are listening in, right? So I have 50, 100 people there, and I don't see them. I see the host in the very beginning, and then I do my speaking.
Right.
And I have to admit, it took me a while to feel comfortable with that. And we do have a lot more people working from home, right? And might be attending meetings or presentations online. And it is difficult because not everybody likes to have the camera on. They might be still in their pajamas. I don't know. Some of them do. But it is a whole new way of presenting as well. Do you have a tip for me as far as the online presenting?
Yes. Two things, and there are more, and I have a one-page tip sheet that I give out at the end of my presentation workshop, and it has these on it as well.
Okay,
but
cool.
So there are more, but one thing that people, because most people know, oh, don't, right, well, I'm not going to chew gum or what have you. I'm not going to, right, wear my pajamas, probably that sort of thing. The thing that people don't necessarily consider as we talk about that eye connection is when I look into that tiny little camera eye, mine happens to be right on top of my computer, it appears to my audience, to the people on the other side, as though I'm looking at them.
Yeah.
So when I'm speaking, I'm looking there because I want to project that I am looking at them. When I'm listening to someone else speak, I change my focus to come down and look at that person.
The picture, yeah.
So, and people can tell the difference, right? You can tell when I'm looking in the camera, you can tell when I'm not looking in the camera. So that's one thing. And I work with college or students who are going on college interviews. And so that's one of the big things that we work on. Another thing is, to your point about what happens if I don't have anyone to look back at me. A really easy idea is now these can be people that you know, they can be people that you cut out of a magazine, it doesn't matter. Some small, right? Create a little small collage of people and put them in a little rainbow right above your camera, right? Because what will happen is it will help you focus on that camera versus looking down here at somebody's name or the presenter. It will help keep your focus up here. And so you'll be looking at the people on the other side of the screen. And again, it can just be, it can be a picture of your dog if you want, but just something to help remind you to stay up there. It can be extremely taxing over, and I'm still teaching sessions or doing workshops where for 2 days in a row, I have 30 people in a room and none of them have their camera on. So it's just all black screen with some names on it.
Very, very different for sure. So in the beginning, I had asked the host to stay there. Having her just hold my camera.
Yes.
And I did so many that, it's a skill of learning. So I got used to just looking at the camera. But that's a great feedback, because it is a challenge when you don't have people there.
Yes.
You're looking at. So, but awesome, fantastic. Wow. This was awesome. So awesome. I know we can talk even more. I think I'm going to have you on again to talk more about your other branches that you're actually doing. I would love to hear though, when somebody works with you, how does that work? Like, they contact you, do you do consultations? How does a company start with you? How does an individual start with you? I would love to hear, because oftentimes I think the biggest thing first is to admit that I need to learn, right? For people, but then where do I reach out to? And
sure.
I know some is organized through companies, so the people there, kind of get thrown into it, so to speak. But there might be also individuals that love to reach out. So how does the process work with you?
Yeah. Absolutely, there is. So I don't know if we'll be posting, or maybe somewhere in the video we can put my contact information. That's for both of us, because I want to make sure that I'm in a position to serve and do the things that you're looking for, and reach the goals that you would like to reach, and make sure that it's a good fit. So, and if it's not, and if you say, hey, that's not really, my sweet spot, that doesn't fall within the things I do, I have a whole network full of other coaches and facilitators who do similar things, or be a bit different. And so sometimes I can connect you with someone without having you have to go down that process. But absolutely, it starts with a little intake form where I'll ask them questions about, what do you want? Why do you want it? When do you want it?
Like yesterday.
Yes, right. Is it individual? Is it a team? Is it a whole organization? And we'll figure out from there. Like I said, everything is customized. So when I became a business owner, there's lots of stuff that's tough. It's tough being a business owner. There's a lot of stuff to it. The one thing that I absolutely it would be really hard for me to stop being a business owner and go back to working for someone or at another place, is that all the freedom that I have. Right? I've done a 1 hour workshop for folks. It has literally just taken on a life of its own, depending on what your needs are, because it's very critical for both of us that everything that we do together makes sense and serves you. Because if not, then why would we do it?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. So we're gonna add the phone number and your website to it. Absolutely. How do you stay? This is my last question for today. How do you stay? Because it's an ever evolving process, right? What is your habit to stay really on the cutting edge?
I was going to say I'm an avid reader, but I'm an avid listener. Audible, I don't get any money for the plug, but Audible has been my go-to. I also have a couple of other apps where it just does the shortened version, right? Kind of the summary version. But it has been wonderful to be able to absorb while I'm waiting in the doctor's office, while I'm driving, while I'm doing whatever it is, while I'm cooking, and be able to get so much information, so much more than if I actually did need to take that time to sit down and read through a book. So that's been lovely. And then talking with colleagues, whether it's a client that I'm learning from, either what the problems of today are, the concerns that are coming up, and then other colleagues, whether they're people that I know personally or not. Because again, it doesn't matter. I firmly believe that we all have things we can learn from one another.
Yeah.
So even when I go to a workshop, maybe, and I say, oh yeah, I teach that kind of workshop, or I have a workshop that sounds almost the same, I'm probably going to go in with the mindset of, what can I learn from this? What can I take from this? I'm not perfect. I'm not above getting better. And in fact, as we all look back through this video, we'll probably say, oh, look, there she said, or there she used her hands differently, right? There's all kinds of things. And that's fine, because there's always room to grow. There's
totally,
never
totally.
you never get there, right? It's
No.
always the horizon that you're
I've had people go like, so when are you done? I'm like, I'm never done.
Yes.
I'm evolving. I'm learning. I'm, learning new knowledge about science research, but also about myself along the journey. So, and that's what this is all about, is really about learning and going deeper in different areas. So I'm super excited. You should, as you said, we're learning from each other, right? Yes. I love this, because you shared a lot of things I wasn't even as aware of, or reminded me again, as well as I think the key is too, and that's what's the purpose of this hour, is really about, there's an M. Got myself on the M there, but I thought, there you go. The purpose is to learn from each other, and having you on was absolute fantastic. I learned a lot, and I know people watching this will learn a lot, and that is my mission, to have a little bit more accessible, getting knowledge, learning from others that are in the different industry, are specialized, and are growth-minded people that truly believe about helping others, which I know you do. So I'm thanking you for your time today.
Well, it was a true delight, Heike, and I am grateful to you as a friend and as one of those colleagues that I do come to and ask questions of, for your brilliance and your knowledge in your niche as well. So thank you again. Thank you to everybody for listening, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
You said it best. Thank you.
Bye.